Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Chris Murray.
Great job, It pays to have great people. Anyone working in this business and the businesses that you're in, you know you're only as good as the people that show up every day and do their job. Everything that Norm and Glenn have just talked about is fundamental to our strategic plan, which Council approved a couple of years ago. That plan is focused on really three things: economic prosperity, service delivery, and leadership. And clearly economic development is certainly holding their own, as are many other departments in our organization. So I'm blessed to be surrounded by really good people. I had the good advantage of having this agenda given to me about a week ago, so I wrestled with what it was I was going to talk about for a few minutes. And so I actually want to just recap a bit of what we've heard so far and just maybe put it into a bit of a context. And all of you have heard of P3s, public-private partnerships. The P3 that I want to focus on is about plans, partnerships, and progress, which I think really important to underscore what we heard in the last hour or so. So we heard about the healthcare industry and the challenges that we're going to face and the need to work together. And just to give you some information here, I know in 10 years that our seniors population here in Hamilton is going to double. We know that there are some significant challenges comes when you're having to look after an aging population. I also know that in the Golden Horseshoe, we're going to continue to experience growth. Although I looked the other day on the ministry website to see what the population growth of Ontario has been over the last couple of years and what's been in the Golden Horseshoe. And there's a bit of a warning, I think, that we should all pay attention to, and that is in the last 2 years, growth in Ontario has been in and around about 100,000 people. We're seeing a lot more growth occur out west than we've seen in Ontario. Ontario, you know, for a kid that's from New Brunswick, I mean, we always looked at the breadbasket of Canada being Ontario, but what we're starting to see is an economic activity and a population growth that is starting to decline, if in some respects you might even say starting to flatline, which in medical terms, flatline is never a good thing. So we know, as I say, in 10 years we're going to see a doubling of our seniors population, and we know that because the baby boomers, of which I'm at the tail end, are all going to be staring at retirement. And I couldn't help but think that, you know, I'm fortunate that I still have my parents. My mom and dad are 92 and 91 respectively, live in their own home in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Except for some hearing loss, they're doing incredibly well. They're not suffering from many of the ailments that seniors suffer from. There's been no hip replacements, no knee replacements, nothing like that. In fact, they shovel their own driveway. They drive the car, although I don't know if Dad should be driving the car, but that's a whole other thing. But I am really lucky, and myself and my 4 older brothers know how blessed we are. My dad has had a good pension for a long time, and he was the sole bread earner. He paid for his house in 1963. Blue-collar guy, worked hard, and continues to do so. So everything we heard, though, in the first section is important, because I think now when I look at my kids, the notion of a single-family earner for a household is gone. That's not going to happen anymore. It's going to take 2 people, if not more, to pay for the household. Notions of pensions and benefits as we go forward in the next 10 years or so, I think that's going to start to be even more troubling. Right now, I've heard somewhere between 8 and 9 people work for every pensioner that's on a pension, and I'm hearing in 10 years or so that's probably going to be more like 4 or 5 people working for every pensioner. And so, you know, when I look at that and I start to think to myself, you know, well, what will the economy of Southern Ontario, the Golden Horseshoe, be? And what is our answer to the healthcare crisis? That is, it's not a question of if, it's really a matter of when, and we know the when. It's starting certainly now and is going to continue in the next 10 years and increase even so. So, you know, what are we doing about it? Well, thankfully, Council of the City of Hamilton as well as the councils of Peel, Halton, KW, Niagara, all saw fit to say to each other, you know what, we need to work together. I mean, the truth is the economy in Hamilton is not isolated by the boundaries of this community. I mean, it's actually part of a region. And as it turns out, we're an hour away from 3 border crossings that are responsible for about 90% of all the trade between the United States and Canada. And so the question about where is our economy going and what can we do to help it is really the conversation that the 5 municipalities are now having. And in fact, all of us have signed a charter, if you will, saying, you know what, we are vested in the economy of the Golden Horseshoe. In fact, the 5 of us know that if we don't work together, we're probably going to experience a decrease in the quality of life that our parents and ourselves have been enjoying. In fact, we're going to hand off to our kids a massive challenge. And so we've agreed that we need to tackle certain things together. And one of the things we need to tackle together is transportation. And by that I mean not just transit, but I mean goods movement as well. It's no secret, transit investment has been short of the mark for some time, and thankfully Metrolinx has got a plan for investment in regional transit, which thankfully we're getting a GO station here in Hamilton, which I think is part of the reason why you see the activity that's occurring in the downtown. A second station out towards Stony Creek is earmarked as well. As we've talked about light rapid transit. We're waiting for an answer from the province in terms of whether or not that in fact is going to be 100% funded. But you know, I look at the matter of transportation as a whole, transit but also goods movement, because I mean at the end of the day, businesses in Southern Ontario have choices. And if there isn't a clear plan for how transportation is going to be addressed, those businesses will make decisions. And I can't help but think, and I know we have the former mayor of Pittsburgh here, who's going to speak in a few minutes, but I can't help but think what's happening across our border right now, New York State, Buffalo in fact, I know what's going on in Texas in terms of the efforts being made to improve the economies in those areas. New York State, as you know, has created some tax benefits that we have not so much even thought of, but in some cases municipalities can't even consider because of bonusing reasons and other reasons. But the fact is that our neighbors across the border are trying to recover their economy, which you can respect them for doing that, but at the same time, it's starting to make opportunities for businesses to maybe consider relocating there. So what are we doing to make sure that the economy of the Golden Horseshoe continues to flourish? And when I look at the state of planning as it relates to transportation, which is but a means to an end, you know, it's not complete. We've got some answers in terms of transit, but we're very much short of the mark in terms of what we're going to do to manage goods movement. And that's why when I heard this morning or the previous session, we had the representation from the airport and the port here, I thought, well, that's fitting, because when you look at Hamilton, we have an airport, we have a port, we have rail, we have two 400 series highways. We have got all modes of transportation here, which has been fundamental to our success for a long time. We are well positioned in the Golden Horseshoe when you think about the Toronto-Hamilton economic region and you think of New York and Chicago. We have opportunities to build on what we already have and be successful. And so that doesn't happen if we operate in isolation. And what we need to be doing, and I think we heard it, Rob McIsaac, I think, is saying it very well about the need to work together. I mean, his answers in healthcare, we can't have everyone going into the hospitals. We, in fact, have got to address some of the challenges that he's facing and Kevin is facing in our neighborhoods. We've got to make our neighborhoods healthy. And I can tell you, it's not just a matter of parks and recreational programming and things like that. It's also a matter of transportation. And I will say to you that, you know, transit investment, I think, is key for the city of Hamilton. And it bothers me that when I hear from Queen's Park that their focus is going to be on relieving congestion, I would say, well, in some respects, as an urban planner, which is what my background is, you know, why are we rewarding municipalities for having allowed development occur that results in congestion and having not answered the transportation problem when that development was approved? Why are we not then investing in those communities where transit is going to help it grow, which is really the situation that we're in? We have an opportunity to work with the province and federal government in a partnership arrangement, whereas they will make a major investment in this community. And that's what we're waiting for. We want to hear the answer to that fundamental question. Are you going to pay for the transit that you had committed a few years ago? And that is critical to our growth. Because at the end of the day, when I start to think about my mom and dad and their ability to move around their community, you know, and we heard about mental health, you know, social isolation is a killer. People need to be able to have access to where they need to shop for food, access medical care, access friends. Having a great transit system in Hamilton, I think, is important. And I think it's important that the municipalities of Peel, Halton, KW, Niagara, and ourselves do, in fact, push the province to have a transportation plan that supports the economy. I think it's important that we work together to ensure that that plan is developed sooner rather than later. And for those that know a bit about my background, I don't think you should have to spend 50 years to plan, design, and build a road. I think that's ridiculous. I think there are opportunities presenting itself right now. The province is going to be revisiting places to grow in the next 2 years. In fact, they're looking to finalize the revamping of that legislation and plan by the end of 2016. And I'm suggesting to my municipal colleagues that maybe if we can work together and set a deadline for coming to some conclusion on what the transportation network of the Golden Horseshoe ought to be, certainly in the West, it would be important. And I'll say this to you, there's reason to be optimistic about where we're at, not geographically only. Population employment growth in the region I just told you about, the 5 municipalities, we will, from the years 2030 to 2040, we will outpace Toronto's growth in population by 3 to 1 and jobs by 4 to 1. And if you do the math and you add up the numbers of members of parliament that exist in Toronto, which are 16, to the numbers of members of parliament that exist in this region I just described, which are 24, if ever we could get our act together and work together to make sure that there is a transportation system that supports the economy, allows us to grow in the right way, I got a feeling some of the health issues will start to get addressed, because at the end of the day, really it is about building a community that is healthy, that does support the good economy that we want, but also we build neighborhoods. And so I think progress can be made. And we need to recognize the fact that this isn't an academic exercise. In fact, it is in front of us right now to address, and I'm confident with the talent that's in this room we can do that. Thanks very much.
So yeah, before you go, Chris, I just wanted to talk about a recent move that you had made, a big one, I believe. We have actually Jason Thorne, the new GM of Planning and Economic Development here. Welcome, Jason, to Hamilton. So this guy really doesn't fit the model. He doesn't come from Central Casting, as far as I'm concerned. So why'd you hire this guy?
Well, and Jason, you must be tired of this joke by now, but he is someone that we can all look up to. At 6'7", he's a Hamilton guy. He's gone away, he's coming back. I mean, at the end of the day, there was a very simple reason why we opted to go with Jason, is that first and foremost, aside from understanding how cities grow, having worked in the planning field, both provincially, in fact, part of the big move and part of Places to Grow, but in the private sector for 6 years, as a principal of a very successful company, well established in Canada. He brings to the table not just a knowledge of planning, but also an ability to engage his staff, which is, I think, really our jobs is to try to make sure that all the people that work in our organization are engaged and empowered to make good decisions, and so that, we not only make good planning decisions, but we get things done. And Jason is built from that mold. You know, he is going to embrace engagement in ways that I don't think you've seen before. As well as I think what you'll see from a private sector standpoint, he's been working with business for well over a decade, very successfully, and he'll tell you that many of them were a little afraid when they saw what was being contemplated in places to grow, but managed to convince the big players that, in fact, it was in their best interest. So he's a great addition to our table at senior management, and I think as people get to know him, you'll see very clearly how capable he is, and most importantly, it's not just his head, but his heart is in this community. His mom and dad live here. In fact, they live up in Ancaster still. So, wonderful addition for us.
Excellent. Great hire. Thank you.
Sure.